I would encourage people within our district to stretch themselves, try writing for voices.
So the District 7 Voices magazine has been an outstanding magazine and a long history with District 7 Toastmasters. This is the first Podmasters podcast interview and introducing a stunning voice for District 7 2023 and 24. Please welcome a conversation with the incoming co-editor of District 7 Voices magazine, Leela Seeber. Leela.
Thank you for having me here, Ray.
Yeah. I wanted to take a theme from the June issue to the June issue of Voices, because I was reading that preparing for this discussion, to take a theme from beginning at the end. I've already enjoyed this conversation. And the intent of my questions today are to get to learn a little bit about you, your experiences in Toastmasters, and maybe explore what we can look to over the next year with Voices. To start with, I always like to ask a question that really can't be prepared for, but the answer is always so interesting. And I ask it every time when I'm asking interviews for a question. Leela, are you ready for the first question?
I'm ready.
All right. Leela, what is the best sandwich?
The best sandwich is a sandwich that someone else makes for me, that I can just sit back and enjoy. And it's even better if I don't have to clean up the mess afterwards, if someone takes my plate away and does the dishes for me.
Now, the nice thing about that sandwich is it's different every single time. And the answer to that question is one of those ones that you can explore all kind of different ways, but they tell you so much about somebody. Like, I just love when somebody provides a sandwich, which is good. Next question is, can you share when you joined Toastmasters, and can you remember the reason you joined when you did?
Oh, definitely. So I joined Toastmasters in January of 2019. And I was in a period of unemployment or opportunity for new growth period in my life. And I really knew that being unemployed was going to be hard for me, that I needed some structure and I needed some outlets with human beings. And that's what drove me to Toastmasters, is having a connection with people while I was going through this unemployment period. Then some things happened. I was put into the position of VP of Education. So I was like, okay, well, continue on this at least until that year is over. Well, by the time that year was over, the pandemic had started. And I really, again, needed some human connection during the pandemic. And I, of course, was meanwhile benefiting by great opportunities within Toastmasters. I've been an area director. I've gotten to do Zoom masters and develop my Zoom mastering skills. This last year, I was just looking for what's next, and that's what led me to Voices.
Nice. So that might lead even directly into my next question is, and this is when I actually read in the June issue of Voices, has there been a Toastmasters aha moment that you share often, that comes to mind and you share all the time?
I think I share different moments depending on the situation and what the person needs to hear. So there's been multiple aha moments, and I think you can make different stories fit what what's needed at the moment.
Nice. I think the same thing. If I were to point at one aha moment, is there's no real difference between a speech and an evaluation. They all use similar parts of the brain, and those are things that I develop, at least when I'm speaking, all the time. Now I want to talk a little bit about voices, because this is a magazine I've only just been introduced to. I'm obviously in District 96, so I'm, hundreds of miles away from where you are right now. But you are the incoming co-editor for Voices for 2023 and 2024. And reading the June issue, there's a theme of beginning at the end. Can you talk a little bit about that theme and what it means?
Of course. So Voices for over 10 years now has had the same editor, a fantastic lady, Phyllis Harmon, who has published these very high level professional magazines. And for me, jumping in, even trying to take over what she was doing, uh, is way beyond where I can begin at. So I think recognizing that this is the end of an era, a new era is beginning, and it's going to be different. Not better, not worse. It's going to be different. Jennifer, my co-editor, and I are really focused on bringing a focus onto the clubs within our district, the people within our district. That's how we distinguish ourselves. We can have the best writing in the world, but if it's not about our clubs and our people, it loses its meaning, I think.
I'm letting that sit with me for a second. That's an idea, the focus on the club membership and what it is. That sounds beautiful. So what does Voices as a magazine mean to you as you step into the role? Like what is one of the things that you're wanting to bring to this role as you come into it?
Well, I see Voices, it's like art club meetings. It's someplace safe to go to experiment with writing. And I want to encourage people, maybe they haven't written anything before for a magazine. This is just a new opportunity. Just like in our clubs, we go in and we stretch ourselves a little and try something new. I would encourage people within our district to stretch themselves, try writing for Voices.
I love that idea. I do. It's a great idea. If like as somebody who's only just been introduced to it, I mean, I'm inspired to try and write something for it as well. And I'm also used to be a video game type person, so I always liked Easter eggs, that where you hide something in the bottom of it. So that's kind of a sidebar question. It may or may not be something that you do, but can you imagine, is there an Easter egg or something like that, a signature that you might put in the magazine that somebody can look for in our next issue?
And that's been suggested. One of the ladies helping out, I think it was Leanna, talked about a magazine, a sewing magazine her mother used to get, and they used to hide a needle somewhere within the magazine, and she remembers always hunting for the needle. So we have been discussing, well, what can we hide within our magazine that would be fun and challenging for people to look for. So if you have any ideas, or anyone listening would has an idea, please let us know.
Heck, off of the top of my head, I imagine a quote from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something like that. Just plop it in at the end of an end of an article somewhere, something like that. You could just put little Douglas Adams quotes in it occasionally, and if people can identify where it was, maybe they get a Toastmasters gift certificate. I don't know. But yeah, I like that. Somebody's already been thinking about that. That's a great idea to play with. So one of the things that I read in your field notes about voices in the June magazine is that we're going to be looking forward to a shift in your publishing strategy for the magazine and difference in your frequency and how you're going to be delivering information over the next 12 months. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. So, Phyllis Harmon, again, totally amazing person, has been putting this magazine out monthly. We're drawing back a little from that for a couple of reasons. Again, we're new at this. We need a little more time to put together the magazine, but we also think that it'll give us more time to focus on quality and focus on getting people excited about the magazine coming out, rather than this being something that lands on their doorstep every month. Well, it's only coming out once a quarter, so you can take the time to read it, and it can be useful to what's going on in your club right now. So the fall edition is going to focus a lot on getting ready for contest season and the upcoming TLI, winter TLI.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I read in the field notes that sounded really interesting to me was that you are incorporating a newsletter into it as well. Is that right?
So the Voices magazine is going to be quarterly, and that's going to have the more in-depth stories. We are also having an email newsletter so that we can keep up more frequently with the achievements of the club, do announcements of upcoming open houses and other things that are important to get out on a timely basis, but are a little briefer. So those are going to start coming out in an email form as we gather up enough news and announcements that will go out as a bulletin in the email. And then for your more in-depth stories, voices will come out quarterly.
I like that idea, that frequent, not super important information, but just useful information coming out frequently, and that big dump of useful information every quarter. I think it's going to be an interesting opportunity to play with, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like. Now, thinking about mentoring, which is a huge part of Toastmasters, in my experience at least, what would you say to a member who has not found their voice yet, perhaps, and perhaps might be open to sharing their voice in an upcoming issue?
I would say just jump in, and definitely I can give you a list of ideas if you're stuck on what to write about. Reading through past voices articles should also inspire you, but send in a submission. We'd love to have it.
Nice. And I was actually thinking about that as I was writing that question too, is to talk about how somebody might experience the publishing process from the pitching an idea to having that story finally ready to be published. How long does it normally take from the moment that somebody has an idea that they give it to you, and then it finally gets cleaned up and issued?
Right. So we've set our deadlines in advance. So our deadline for our fall issue is August 15th. So the people who are writing articles right now are winding them up. We're getting together those articles then, and then that leaves us time. We're not getting our uh, issue out until October. Our goal is October 15th. Gives us time to edit and arrange things within the magazine. But
So
it's really as simple as them submitting something, and if we have to do some adjustments, we can get back with them.
So if they're thinking of issuing something, then really that's what they want to think about, is that 2-month lead time from submission deadline to issuing. So you've got 2 months of time for you to work with it to make sure that it's clear, that it's edited, and that it says what it needs to be able to say. And if you want to put any images to it or anything like that, that really it's good to lay that process out for somebody, because they might have an idea that maybe is appropriate for April and they want to start working on it, and they're thinking, well, so they've really got until February to finish it. And whatever that timeline would be. So since the magazine is expected to have 4 quarterly issues, have you mapped out any ideas or seasons for what the theme would be with each issue already?
And we are going to be reporting on the topics that are important in Toastmasters. So as we go through our Toastmaster season, fall, we're talking about contest season. As we get into the issue that comes out in the winter, we'll be talking more about getting ready for elections. How do you start getting people interested in elections and making that commitment? And then the next issue can talk a little more, well, how do you actually hold the election and make that transition of power? So the issues that my hope is that there are club members and officers who are kind of just going, well, how do I approach this? And then the Voices magazine comes out and there's the answers for them.
I love it. It works really well. We're almost at the end of the questions I prepared for this already, and you've got some good stories out of this as well. Now, these are the last two questions I have for you here, and they're both about that challenge, that third item on the evaluation sheet of to challenge yourself. And with this new beginning, because that's what this is, what is a challenge that you might issue to District 7 to help make this year the best year for Voices?
My challenge would be to share the magazine. We're going to be focusing on the success of the clubs, and that's something that you can share. Post the magazine on your website, post it on your LinkedIn page, share it with coworkers at work. That would be the challenge that I'd like our people to follow through with.
I love it. That's really good. And what an easy thing for everybody to do is to pick up what article jumped out at you? What thought did this make you think of? What story came out of this? Maybe what article would you submit for it if you wanted to share your ideas? Now, my last question is one, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit for. It's a challenge for you. And it's an idea I've pulled from another podcast that I listened to, which is where the person being interviewed leaves a question for the next guest. So, assuming I have another episode of this podcast, assuming I talk to somebody else in District 7, and assuming that this becomes just the first interview of many, what is a question that you might ask the next person that we interview for Podmasters podcast?
Well, I'm always interested in how people establish healthy boundaries and balance in their life. So
That's
that's
good.
what I want to know is how do they uh like I taking on this challenge, I realized I'm not doing every month. That's too much. And so we scaled it back to quarterly. So I'd like to hear how someone else applies some boundaries.
Now that is perfect. Thank you for joining me in this podcast, this experiment in Podmasters. And I'm hoping that we can continue this uh, discussion for weeks and weeks and months. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, hopefully we can both meet back here in a year after you've done successful podcasts and I've had successful magazines, and we can look back and celebrate our achievements together.
This podcast has been brought to you by Podmasters in District 7. This club is almost about to charter, and if you would like to join us, we meet on the first and third Sunday of every month. Details can be provided on request.